It's hard to describe the feeling when you think you know someone, and then suddenly everything shatters. I still remember the exact moment I overheard that voice on the phone, the low, familiar tone that I never expected I'd hear from Jack, my best friend, late at night in my own house. I'd been lying on the couch, exhausted after a long day, scrolling through my phone when I heard it. The muffled words, whispers, the sound of a voice that was supposed to be mine, came from the other end of the line. At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe I'd left the TV on or someone was over. But as I crept closer to the hallway, I could make out parts of the conversation. Jack's voice, relaxed and familiar, and hers, soft, breathless, and unmistakably intimate. I froze. My heart pounded so loud I was sure they could hear it through the doorway. I wanted to scream, to storm in, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I listened, stunned, as they talked about meeting up, about not letting this go and being careful. It was like someone had punched me in the gut. How could the guy I'd trusted my whole life, my best friend, be doing this right under my nose? I just proposed earlier that day in the park, with the ring I'd saved up for months for. I'd been so proud, so happy, imagining a future. And now I was standing in my own house, overhearing Jack and my wife plotting their secret rendezvous. I saw the unopened box from the jewelry store still sitting on the table, the ring inside glinting under the dim light. I could feel my palms start to sweat and my stomach sank like I'd swallowed a stone. I knew I had to listen longer to catch every word. I had to know how long this had been going on, how deep the betrayal went. It was like watching my whole life unravel in slow motion. When the call ended, I stayed frozen for a moment. My mind raced through the last few months, little things I'd ignored, odd looks, postponed plans, her phone always tucked away, her sudden interest in a new gym routine. All of it suddenly made sense. How she'd seemed distant lately, distracted. She was sneaking around and I'd been too blind to see it. I finally moved, backing away from the wall, my hands trembling. I couldn't confront her then, not yet. I needed time to process, to plan. She'd been my wife for 5 years, but now I didn't know who she was. The trust I thought I had was gone, evaporated in one night of overheard secrets. I looked around my house, our house, and everything looked different. The pictures on the wall, the furniture, even the faint scent of her perfume, everything seemed tainted. I had no idea what to do next. Do I confront her with what I know? Do I explode and ruin everything outright? Or do I gather more evidence, come up with a plan? The betrayal felt like a punch to the stomach that I couldn't shake off. I had trusted her completely, more than anyone in my life. And Jack, my best friend, how could they do this to me, to us? I sat down on the couch trying to breathe. My fingers felt numb. Every sound suddenly seemed louder, the ticking of the clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator. My mind kept circling back to that conversation, that voice, her voice. The betrayal was real and I knew I had to act. But how? How do you trust your instincts after discovering something so rotten? I looked at the ring again, lying in its box. That symbol of my hope, my love for her, gone. I realized that if I didn't do something, I'd be living a lie and I'd never trust her again. But I also knew I couldn't just blow up everything immediately. I had to play it smart to make her believe I didn't know. That's when the plan started forming in my mind, a way to make her see that I wasn't the fool she thought I was. And Jack was going to regret this. I could feel it in my bones. Whatever I did next, they'd both regret crossing me. I'd waited years for trust, and now I was ready to take it all back on my terms. The night was just the beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind kept replaying that voice from the night before, that betrayal echoing in my ears. I couldn't sleep anymore, so I got up, sat at the kitchen table and stared at the coffee maker. My hands were still trembling and I kept rethinking my options, confronting her, facing Jack, or just disappearing for a while until I figured out what to do. I knew I needed more evidence, something concrete that would make her realize I knew everything. I also knew I couldn't just accuse her out of anger. I had to have proof. So I started planning how to find it. Her phone was always hidden, but I'd seen her leave it around, sometimes unlocked when she went to the bathroom. If I could get a glimpse, maybe I'd find some messages, some proof. I waited until she left for work, acting casual, pretending everything was fine. I moved slowly, making sure I didn't look suspicious. Her purse was on the kitchen table, an open book, her keys, and her phone. I reached for it, my palms sweaty. My heart was pounding so loud I thought she might hear it through the door. I quickly unlocked the screen, and there it was, a string of messages from Jack. I scrolled through, and my stomach clenched. They'd been chatting nonstop, talking about meeting up after work, about not telling the wife, and making it worth it. They'd even made plans for a weekend getaway without me. My fingers clenched into fists, and I felt the rush of anger spike through my chest. I knew I couldn't just leave it at that. I had to get more. I searched her emails, her social media, anything that could give me more ammunition. Every second I found more, my resolve hardened. She'd betrayed me, lied to my face for months, maybe longer. Jack, my best friend, was complicit. That was the part that burned the most. I'd never thought either of them could do this. Never. I had one goal now. I wanted them to understand I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. I needed to make her see that I knew that I had enough to tear everything apart. The plan was unfolding in my head, slow, meticulous. I wanted to strip away the lies, reveal her betrayal publicly, but without losing my own control. I wasn't aiming for petty revenge, not yet. I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd done, to understand that trust, once broken, could never be repaired. Later that day, I called Jack. I didn't bother with small talk. "We need to talk," I said, voice steady but cold. "Meet me at the bar tonight." When he arrived, I looked him straight in the eyes. "I know everything about you and her. I've seen the messages." Jack's face went pale. "Look, man, you think you can just sneak around behind my back and get away with it?" I cut him off. "You're finished. I don't want to hear your excuses. I want to know how long you've been doing this." He stammered, trying to muster some justification, but I didn't want to hear it. The betrayal cut too deep. That was the moment I knew I had to do something big. Not just to hurt her, but to make her realize that her deception was something I'd never forget. Back at home, I started drafting my plan. I wanted her to see me as someone who could turn everything against her if she didn't come clean. I'd let her think she still had control, but secretly I was setting up the perfect trap. No violence, no shouting, just pure, calculated precision. I was going to make her feel the same chaos she'd brought into my life, but on my terms. I knew she'd try to deny everything at first. That's fine. I'd have the evidence to make her sweat. I'd send her a message later that night. "We need to talk first thing tomorrow." I wanted her to think she still had some power, some time, but I wasn't going to give her the chance to deny it. All I could think about was how to make her see I wasn't some fool she could cheat on and walk over. I was angry, yes, but also focused. I'd been betrayed once, by her and Jack, and I'd make damn sure they paid. The plan was simple: reveal everything at the right moment, make her realize I wasn't the guy who would just forgive and forget. Not anymore. As I sat there, staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange mix of calm and rage. I was about to turn the tables on them both. They thought I was naive, maybe weak, but they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed. And now I was pushed to the edge. Whatever came next, I knew it would be decisive. I'd make her regret ever crossing me. And Jack, he'd wish he'd never answered that damn phone that night. That night, I laid out the plan in my mind over and over. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but I had to be careful. If I rushed, I'd blow everything. If I waited too long, I might lose my chance. I wanted her to feel the slow burn of realization, that she thought she was still in control when I was already 10 steps ahead. I decided that tomorrow morning was the best time to confront her, but I had to set the stage first. I borrowed her phone again, secretly, when she was asleep. I activated a tracking app I knew she never suspected, so I could follow her movements without her knowing. I wanted to see where she went, who she met with, if she kept her promises to Jack. I needed to know everything she was doing behind my back. That night I lay awake, my fists clenched in the dark, listening to her breathing. My stomach was a tight knot. The house was silent except for the faint sound of her breathing and the occasional creak of the old floors. I thought about all the years I'd trusted her, all the plans, the dreams we shared. Now all of it was a lie. I felt a cold fury building inside me, a desire to make her pay. In the early hours, I moved quietly, slipping my phone into her purse, and then I slipped out of bed. I went into the living room and poured myself a glass of water. My mind was racing, but I kept my face calm. I was already planning what I'd say when I confronted her, how I'd make her understand that I knew everything, that I wasn't just some fool to be played with. By dawn, I had a full picture of her whereabouts. She met Jack early in the morning at a cafe downtown. I saw her smile, heard her laugh in the recordings I'd secretly captured. Her voice sounded so different from the person I'd married. That was a stranger I was staring at, someone capable of breaking my trust so completely. I kept the evidence to myself during breakfast, watching her with a mixture of disgust and heartbreak. When she finally announced she was leaving for work, I handed her the note. I prepared. We need to talk face to face, be ready when you get home. She looked at it, confused but also wary. I could see her eyes darting around, trying to hide something. She left, and I felt a strange calm settling over me. Now I knew what she was doing, who she was with, and how deep the betrayal ran. I knew what I had to do next. I wasn't going to just confront her and cry. No, I wanted her to see that I'd been planning everything carefully, that she had underestimated me. When she finally came home that evening, she looked tense. I was already waiting in the living room, arms crossed, cold and collected. "We need to talk," I said, voice even but firm. She hesitated, her eyes flickering with guilt, no denial, just that nervous energy that told me she knew she was caught. I pulled out the phone, showing her the recordings, the messages, the times I'd tracked her movements. Her face drained of color. "You've been lying to me for months," I said. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know it was this bad. I paused, watching her squirm. "So what do you want to say for yourself?" She stammered, trying to brush it off, but I interrupted her. "Save it. I already know the truth. Jack's been here meeting you, sneaking around, and I've got the proof." I let the silence hang heavy, letting her feel the weight of her betrayal. "You're not the woman I married. You're just someone I don't know anymore." Her face twisted with guilt, but she tried to speak again. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I was confused. "Save it." I cut her off again. "Your actions speak for themselves. I don't think I can trust you again, not after this." I paused, feeling the cold resolve inside me. "And Jack, you're finished. We're done." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't feel anything but a dull ache. I'd given her enough chances, enough hints. Now it was time for the final step. I handed her the divorce papers I'd prepared earlier that day. "Sign these, it's over." She looked at me, trembling, and finally she nodded. I saw her reach for a pen, and as she signed the papers, I felt a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. The house that once felt like home was now just a shell. I took the papers from her trembling hands, folded them, and put them in my pocket. I'd made sure she understood one thing: trust, once broken, is impossible to rebuild. And I was no longer willing to pretend everything was okay. The betrayal had cut too deep, and I was done playing the fool. That day, I handed over the keys to the house, packed my things, and walked out for the last time. I didn't look back. I knew I'd survive this, and in time I'd find someone who would actually value me. But for now, I needed to cut the cord and start over. Because if there's one thing this story taught me, trust is fragile, and once shattered, you better have a plan to pick up the pieces. After I handed over the divorce papers and watched her sign them, I felt like I was finally breathing again, though that air tasted bitter. I had spent years building that life, dreaming about our future, and now it was all gone in a matter of days. Still, in some strange way, I felt a weight lifting, like I'd been carrying around this heavy, rotten secret, and now I could finally set it down. But I knew better than to think the storm was over. The aftermath, what came next, would be the real test. I wasn't going to let her or Jack get away with this without consequences, not without a price. They thought betrayal was just a game. Fine. I'd show them that betrayal costs more than they bargained for. I spent the next couple of days quietly planning my move. No rash decisions, just cold, calculated steps toward reclaiming some shred of control. First, I changed my locks. I wanted her to understand she no longer had a hold on me. I cleaned out the house, tossing anything that linked her to the old life: photos, gifts, her clothes. It was a ritual, a way of shedding the past, of making her realize I was serious about moving on. I also deleted all the messages, all the evidence I had collected. I needed a clean slate, but I kept the most important stuff locked away, just in case I needed it later. The next step was giving Jack a piece of my mind. I didn't bother calling him first. I wanted to see his face when I told him what I thought of him. I showed up at his apartment unannounced. No knocking, no warning, just pushed the door open and looked at him. His eyes widened the moment he saw me, guilt and surprise flashing across his face. "Jack," I said coldly, "you've got some explaining to do." He tried to lie to dodge, but I cut him off. "You've been sleeping with my wife. I saw the messages, the calls. You think you're clever, sneaking around behind my back. Well, guess what? I don't need you anymore. You're dead to me." He looked guilty, but I knew better. I'd seen that look before. It was the look of someone who knew they'd crossed a line and now they were trying to pretend it didn't matter. I wanted to make sure he understood the damage he'd caused. "You're done," I repeated, voice low and dangerous. "Don't come near me or her again, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you really are." I left him standing there, feeling the cold wind of betrayal hit him. Now I had to think about how to make her pay. The betrayal was one thing, but I wanted her to understand the full scope. I wanted her to feel the loss, the regret. So I started working on my revenge plan, careful, precise, and effective. I didn't want to ruin her outright, but I needed her to feel the sting of what she'd lost. The first move was to cut her off completely. No more contact, no explanations. I returned the keys to her apartment and told her I'd send her the official divorce papers in the mail. I also threw out her clothes and her belongings that I didn't want lingering in my space. It was about removing her presence, making her realize I was done. I wanted her to feel like she'd lost her grip on my life. But revenge isn't just about destruction. It's about sending a message. I knew I had to be subtle but firm. I started by contacting her friends, people she trusted, people who knew her best, and I told them what I'd found. I didn't badmouth her, but I made sure they knew she was capable of betrayal. That way, the circle around her would start to see her differently. I also set up a little social experiment. I posted a photo on my social media, nothing revealing, just a shot of me at the lake looking calm and confident. No caption, no explanation, but I watched her reactions. I wanted her to see that I was moving on, that I was stronger than her betrayal. If she thought she'd broken me, she was dead wrong. One evening, I received a message from her, a simple, trembling apology. She wanted to talk, to explain. I didn't reply. I knew what she was trying to do. She wanted to pull me back into her web, make me feel guilty, make me doubt myself. But I was done doubting. I responded with silence, and that silence was my victory. The truth was, I didn't need to say much anymore. The damage was done. She had lost me, and I had taken back my power. I felt like I'd won a small battle, but the war was far from over. I had to keep my guard up, keep moving forward. Because people like her, people like Jack, don't change overnight. And truthfully, I wasn't sure I wanted her to come back. Not after what I'd learned. So I continued my quiet revenge, one step at a time. Cutting ties, rebuilding myself, and making sure she understood she'd lost the best thing she ever had. The house was empty now, the future uncertain, but I knew one thing. I was finally reclaiming my life. And that for now was enough. A few weeks passed, and I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I'd done everything I could to cut her out, to reclaim my space and my dignity. The house was eerily quiet without her footsteps, her voice, her presence. I'd moved out most of her belongings, left the keys in the mailbox, and kept my distance. Still, there was a gnawing feeling that the worst was over, but the aftermath was just beginning. One evening, I sat in a quiet bar, nursing a drink. I wasn't the type to drown my sorrows, but I needed a moment to breathe. As I sipped, I kept replaying that night I overheard her and Jack. The betrayal still haunted me, but I'd learned to manage it. I was focused on rebuilding, on moving forward. But I knew better than to think I'd forget. Entirely. It wasn't just a scar, it was a wound that would sting if I wasn't careful. Just as I was about to leave, I saw her walk in. She looked different, more vulnerable, more beaten down. Her eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine. I felt that familiar rush of anger, but I pushed it down. Instead, I decided to confront her head-on. I approached her table and sat down without waiting. "You're here," I said coldly. "I thought you'd be hiding out somewhere, avoiding everything." She looked up, surprised, her hands trembling slightly. "I just wanted to see how you were," she whispered. I know I messed up. I'm sorry, really sorry. I shook my head slowly, feeling my jaw tight. Sorry doesn't fix what you did. Sorry doesn't erase the fact that you lied to me, cheated on me with my best friend. Sorry doesn't rebuild the trust you shattered. I leaned closer, voice low and deliberate. You think apologies matter now, after everything, because I don't believe you, not anymore. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I hesitated. But then I remembered the nights I'd stayed awake wondering if I'd ever trust anyone again. The broken promises, the secrets. I felt my fists clench. I wasn't about to let her manipulate me again. I want you to leave, I said finally, voice steady, and stay away. I don't want to see you again, not like this, not ever. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and she got up to leave. I watched her walk out, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. I knew I'd hurt her, but I also knew I'd done what I had to do. I'd taken back my power. That night I made a decision. I was done chasing her, done trying to fix what was broken. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I was also stronger than I'd thought. I'd learned that some wounds cut too deep and some betrayals leave scars that never fully fade. But I'd also learned that I still had control over my life, no matter how bitter the taste of betrayal. I started planning my next move, how to rebuild myself, how to find peace. I knew I'd never forget what happened, but I could choose how it defined me. I might be broken for a while, but I was also resilient. I'd come out of this stronger, clearer on what I wanted and what I deserved. And that's when I realized revenge isn't about destruction alone. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your happiness. It's about knowing when to stand up and say, enough, and then walking away knowing you did everything you could. Because in the end, the best revenge is living well, without the past weighing you down. And I was finally ready to do just that. The last thing I did was a small but meaningful act. I packed up everything that reminded me of her, the photos, the gifts, that piece of the life I thought we had. I took the house keys and formally handed over the deed to the lawyer, making it official. When I dropped the paperwork in the mailbox, I felt the final weight lift from my shoulders. It was done. The chapter was closed. Walking away from that house, I couldn't help but think about how much I'd been through. It had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done. Learning that the woman I loved had betrayed me, and that my best friend was no longer someone I could trust. I'd been broken, angry, confused, but ultimately I'd chosen to reclaim my life. I'd refused to be a victim of betrayal. Instead, I'd become someone who refused to be defined by that pain. Now I'm in a different place. I still get flashes of anger sometimes, still feel a sting when I think about all the time lost. But I also feel a sense of clarity I never had before. I know what I want now, something genuine, something built on trust and honesty. I've started dating again, slowly, cautiously. It's scary to trust again, but I realize now that it's necessary. I can't hide forever. Looking back, I see how important it is to trust your instincts. If I hadn't overheard that call, I might never have known. If I hadn't taken control and planned my move, I'd still be living in that pain. Betrayal is a cruel teacher, but it also taught me strength. I learned that even when everything falls apart, you have a choice, either to stay broken or to rebuild. The biggest lesson I want to share is this: trust is fragile, but it's also something you build slowly, carefully. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix, so don't ignore the early warning signs. Listen to your gut. Pay attention to the little things that don't add up. Because if you don't, you might find yourself in a situation where you're reconstructing your life from the ruins, and trust me, that's a long, painful road. I also learned that revenge isn't about retaliation or getting even. It's about reclaiming your power, about proving to yourself that you're stronger than the betrayal, that you're capable of moving on, and that you deserve better. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away, head held high, knowing you did everything possible to protect your heart. So to anyone out there going through something similar, don't underestimate your own resilience. Sometimes the pain feels unbearable, but it's also a sign you're alive, that you still have fight left in you. Take control, process your emotions, and don't be afraid to cut ties that threaten your peace. Because at the end of the day, the most important thing is your happiness and your dignity. I won't pretend I'm perfect or that I've moved on completely, but I am finally free. free from lies, from betrayal, from the false hope that things could ever be the same again. And that freedom, that's worth everything.